All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Conversations on Retail. My name is Matt Pfeiffer. It is an absolutely beautiful day in Bentonville, Arkansas. We're so glad you're here. Brand Elverston continues his series today, focused on asset protection and risk mitigation. And today, Brand welcomes Lisa LaBruno, Senior EVP of Retail Operations for Retail Industry Leaders Association. And they'll be having a conversation about the initiatives impacting retailers' most pressing challenges. So we're so glad that you're both here. Just a couple of things in the way of housekeeping. First of all, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors, the companies that make this group and series possible. Our friends at Barcoding, at Zero Eyes, at Everseen, at RapidTag, and OcuCon. In case you missed it, Brand has put up quite a body of work with us just in the past year, and you can check out some of his past conversations on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@Conversations on Retail. Just a reminder that this is intended to be a conversation and not a presentation. We would invite you to participate by clicking on the Q&A button at any point in Zoom and submitting your questions or comments in writing, and Brad will moderate those as he sees them and as time allows. And lastly, just in terms of compliance, it's really important that we comply with all federal antitrust laws. We're not going to talk about anything related to pricing, margin, discounts. I'm not sure how relevant is this conversation, but we like to get it out of the way. I guess the very, very, very last thing is the opinions, recommendations expressed by Brand and his guests are their own and not necessarily those of Conversations on Retail. So before acting on those opinions or recommendations, make sure that they are suitable for your own circumstances. So Brand, with that all said, take it away.
All righty. Thanks, Matt. Good afternoon, morning, good day, wherever you are around the globe. Appreciate all of you joining us for another segment. This one, guys, has been in the works for a while. Those of you that know me, I mean, we've had quite a guest list in the past months, but uniquely, Lisa, our guest this month, she's unique in a lot of ways. Those of us that know her know that. But what she brings to the table is an encompassing umbrella view of the retail industry, whereas when I interview vice presidents from retailers, or certainly General Petraeus or Rob Beastle from Asda and Walmart Canada, that's kind of their lane, if you will. But Lisa has the bird's eye view of everything. And I thought nothing more appropriate in the month of December, as a lot of retailers are kind of slowing down and speeding up, getting ready for the holidays, that we could kind of give us a State of the Union. So I think I first met you, Lisa, in about 2010. Is that about right, when you joined RILA?
Actually, Brand, I think we knew each other when I was at the Home Depot, because Home Depot and Walmart would do benchmarking trips. So I came out to Walmart as part of one of those benchmarking trips, and I think that's where I met you.
Okay, that's right. So it's been a lot of years, guys. That's 13, 15 years. So anyway, Lisa's got a ton of experience. For those that may not know Lisa, I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to kind of give your background. But Lisa not only is an industry expert with a bird's eye view I talked about, she's also a W-2 from actual retail. So she's worked both sides of the fence. So this isn't a pure academic discussion or a media opinion. This is practitioner balanced with your 10 years or more at RILA. So give us a little background, Lisa, on you, and then we'll kick it off.
Sure. Really a privilege to be with you, Brand. Always good to have robust conversation with industry experts, but also with friends. So appreciate the opportunity. Before coming to RILA, I spent about 10 years at the Home Depot as an in-house attorney supporting the loss prevention group enterprise-wide. And before that, I was a prosecutor in Hudson County, New Jersey, which is directly across from where the World Trade Center once stood. So very urban area, lots of crime, so good fodder for prosecutors. So I'm really a crime person at heart. Have always had a passion for it, practicing in that space. And the great thing about RILA is it allows me to continue to work in that space and at the same time develop really wonderful relationships with some of the brightest minds in the retail industry.
Appreciate it. You know, as we get started, so you've been in the industry, I think, since 2001.
Right.
In that 22 years, what's changed?
Hmm.
I mean, what hadn't changed could be the easiest response to that. But in your perspective, what do you think are the notable changes in that last 22 years?
Yeah, look, when I think about what's changed, it's sort of more short-term pass, right? To go back 22 years, and you can even say I was in the industry when I worked as a prosecutor, since I worked on retail crime cases there as well. When I think about the more immediate past, say over the past, 5-6 years, I think one of the biggest changes, or one of the most significant circumstances that's led to a lot of change, is the pandemic, and what it's done to in-store operational policies as it relates to asset protection. I think the societal issues, while they've not changed, they've gotten more complex, in my opinion. That has impacted retail AP. So think about, the drug epidemic, and how much worse it's gotten. Homelessness. There's more people today suffering from mental health issues, significant mental health issues, that's showing up in the store environment. And, honestly, Brand, and again, my personal opinion, I feel like there's a general lack of civility that really showed up during the pandemic, that's lingering. We saw countless examples of otherwise good people mistreating store associates day in and day out. And the mistreatment getting to the point of assaults on store associates. And it feels like, I know there was violence before the pandemic. I know that was happening in the store environment before that, but it feels like it's gotten worse starting with the pandemic, because I think before that, we were used to the criminal actors using violence against store associates, right? I don't think we were as used to the otherwise good customers mistreating associates, the way in which we saw that happen during the pandemic. And I don't know if that's just fueled the fire, but it does feel like, and we've got data to support that retailers are seeing an increase in violence against their in-store associates, which has really led to this bigger crime problem in and around stores. I think civil unrest is something that feels new in terms of, look, people have always protested going back, 20, 30 years, right?
Yeah.
But the folks who are exploiting legitimate civil protests to do bad things, and a lot of times those bad things show up in the retail spaces in the form of widespread looting, or other bad behavior that impacts the store environments. And so, from my perspective, it just feels like there's more crime, there's more violence, there's more that retail frontline associates are having to deal with than they've never had to deal with before. I mean, can you imagine, Brand, 20 years ago, would you have ever thought that retailers would need to have psychological first aid training in their stores so that they can deploy when a frontline worker, has to deal with an uncivil customer, or a criminal actor, or groups of criminal actors who come in with sledgehammers, bashing glass and stealing large quantities of goods and threatening associates? I mean, you never would have thought that something that would have happened, right? I do think sort of that crime element has changed dramatically over the years. I think litigation has changed dramatically over the years. You're seeing these nuclear verdicts as it relates to civil liability imposed on retailers arising out of security related issues that are just shocking in some respects and causing retailers to really pause and revisit all of the protocols that they're putting in place. And the last thing I'll say is the proliferation of online marketplaces, right? And what it's meant, not just in terms of the customer shopping experience, more shoppers shopping online, particularly during the pandemic. And that has sort of maintained coming out of the pandemic, but also what it means for the criminal actors and the many venues they have to sell stolen product. It used to be, I remember starting at RILA 11 years ago, all we talked about was eBay, right? Yep. Now it's yep. eBay, Amazon, Facebook Marketplace, Mercari, OfferUp, right? And all of these other Craigslist, all of these other online marketplaces that serve as venues for bad actors to do bad things.
Yeah, I agree. Every conversation that we have, and even with, General Petraeus, COVID had a deep yet realized effect on everything we consider normal.
Yep.
So, another litmus test of the level of violence are the airlines, which, I make no secret of it. I am not a fan of the airlines, but they had a lot of violence on the airplanes. And putting those people at risk. We've seen a dramatic increase in active shooter scenarios that affect everybody in the store, not just the AP guys. And, in my 20 odd years at Walmart, we never had an active shooter event. I retired in March of 17. El Paso was post my retirement. We unfortunately did have what we used to call in-store loss prevention associates, which are the guys that, caught the shoplifters. We did have, on occasion, fatalities there. But we didn't have the broad scale concern that you're talking about, where if I'm a cashier, I don't have to worry about possibly getting my ass whipped running a cash register in a store. And I think today that's a very real and present challenge for the retail operators to be able to somehow keep tabs on. So I agree with that. The headline to me in all of retail is not so much ORC, and all those sorts of things. It's the violence, the incivility you talked about, and just the brazenness of being able to come into a store and do what they did. I think it was Macy's or Nordstrom's with 20, 30 people and just grab everything and walk out unabated.
Yeah.
And then depending on the municipality you're in, whether you're ever even going to get pursued by law enforcement or not, we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So what do you think, Lisa? And again, I want to go back to you because it's uniquely valuable. You have an inside view of all of the top players in all of retail across the United States and probably the globe. What is top of mind for them this year, 2023? What's really keeping these guys up? Same issues?
It's the same theme, Brand. But what I will say is paramount. What's keeping them up is the safety of their people. That's because look, they'll lose whatever widget they need to lose. It's a cost of doing business. What keeps them up is how they protect their people. And I can tell you from my perspective, I talk to a lot of AP leaders. Man, they are drained, right? They're drained because their people are getting hurt. They're being threatened. They're being assaulted. And look, no irony. It's no coincidence. It's a timing thing. We had another LP associate murdered last week in Philadelphia by a shoplifter who left the store and came back to kill this kid and to maim another AP associate, right? It's not like, oh gosh, that never happens. And how ironic it is that you and I are talking the week after that occurred. It happens.
Yeah.
Associates are, and it's not just the LP associates who are engaging shoplifters, right? It's the non-AP associates who are really, like you said, they're cashiers. They're frontline associates who are not even engaging bad guys and girls, right? And they're being threatened and assaulted. And the AP leaders with whom I engage, they're shouldering it. They're shouldering a lot of the emotion that goes along with, their employees being hurt, or worse yet, in the most tragic of cases, killed. And they're constantly asking themselves, what could I have done differently? Which I would say probably nothing, right? Nothing you can do is going to stop that guy from coming back in and murdering an AP associate, right? But it's human nature, and them being the leaders that they are, Brand, they take it on themselves, and it's like, what do I need to do differently to protect my team? And so, look, that's what's keeping them up at night. There used to be a time, Brand, and I don't remember. Did you grow up as a shoplift catcher?
No, yeah. I was active duty and then came on as a MAPM.
Well, I knew you were active duty, obviously. Yeah. I just didn't know if you ever caught shoplifters.
No.
But there was a time when, apprehension associates, they'd run after these shoplifters, right?
Hell yes.
for blocks and blocks, and they'd tackle them and they would handcuff them. And but now you can't do that for a whole host of reasons, right? Legal liability. But these people are armed, whether if it's not a knife, it's a gun. They're violent, right? And so what we saw in the pandemic is retailers shut down their loss prevention apprehension programs, right? Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, some of their stores,
understandably, yeah.
Right? If stores were open, they weren't stopping shoplifters. Once the stores that were closed reopened, and they started to think about, well, now what do? We shut down our program. Do we resurrect it? What we're seeing is they're resurrecting the apprehension programs, but those programs look very different today, Brand. You would not imagine how many retailers are hands off today versus we're not, just 3 years ago. And that's a combination of what the pandemic started, but also the level of violence that's being lodged against associates and retailers trying to think of everything they can do to put people before their product.
Yeah, that, the hands off, that's a great segue into that, because I was personally, obviously being a staff director, involved in some of those decisions when we moved away from handcuff policy and we started doing the hands off, and we went through protocols of, look, you can't touch them, you can't, and we did, so in 1995, you're right, it was the Wild West, game on. They would run in the parking lot, tackle them, get in front of the cars, and then when those fatalities started showing up, it became wait a minute, what the hell are we doing? Who cares about a cartload of TVs? Is it easier to absorb that shrink cost or go do a notification to a family that is indefensible that you had a fatality? So I often take exception and I bristle when I read in the press from people that are, Monday morning quarterbacks talking about how can you tell store employees they can't stop shoplifting, et cetera, et cetera. I'm like, when you're in that chair, you'll realize that there is nothing in that store that's worth a human life or even an injury. So, you know what? Yes. And when we did that years ago, the red flag was, oh my God, shrink's going to explode. We're giving the stores away. Things settle down. We get into a routine. It's common sense, but throw gas on the fire, like you just said, the incivility and insanity, frankly, that occurred during COVID for a multitude of reasons has really made that even exponentially more dangerous to the rank and file store associate. So when people see the store associate with a phone in their hand, filming them instead of tackling them and questioning that logic, I'm like, you know what? You'd be better, go sell cookies on a nightstand somewhere because you don't get what the risk is. What about RILA's partnership in the district attorneys? Because another headline grabber is whatever the motivation, not prosecuting, raising those thresholds to felony, all that stuff that's been going on forever, but it's making headlines of late more. Talk to us about RILA's partnership with national district attorneys.
Yeah, as a former prosecutor, Brand, this one is really special to me, and I think it's a game changer. It's already shown tremendous results, and I think this partnership is just going to accelerate our crime mitigation strategies. And so think about it. You know, our industry has spent years educating law enforcement on, you know, what is organized retail crime? What does retail crime look like generally? How can we work better together to investigate and go after some of these high impact offenders? And, you know, there's been a ton of progress since I started at RILA. And I'm not taking credit for that progress. The industry has really done a nice job of extending the olive branch to law enforcement. Law enforcement has reciprocated. You know,
Mike Lamb's a great example of that when he did with Chief Colby, bless his heart, who passed recently with Arlington, Texas. Mike was all over that to a point where when he asked me to go do, what was it, Cops Night Out, or I've forgotten the program name that the cops, Night Out. And we got on a bus and we're riding around, and my head was in a different place then. I'm thinking, what in the hell am I doing? Riding around with a busload of cops, stopping in random neighborhoods, having sandwiches and talking to them. And then, you know, of course, the chief, Chief Jones, I guess it was at the time I was with, Arlington PD, you know, thanks for the warning, Chief. But he's like, and our guest from Walmart would like to share a few things. And you're sitting there with a yard full of residents. But that was Mike. And Mike's like, you know, in Mike's own words, you know, it's like, you'll figure it out when you get there. You'll understand what this means. When I, probably knowing me, question Mike, I'm like, dude, seriously, what the hell? And he's like, get on the bus, go down there, you'll make a difference. And Chief Colby is one of the closest friends I had for years.
Awesome.
Great guy.
Awesome.
So perfect example.
Yeah, and there's countless examples of that over the years, Brand, of, look, retailers and law enforcement, they go to CLEAR, right? Coalition of Law Enforcement and Retail. They've got a conference every year, and you've got cops and retailers sitting next to each other, collaborating, right? The ORCAs, you've got cops and retailers working together to collaborating. And, you know, it struck us that, well, wait, the prosecutors play a similarly important role in helping to mitigate retail crime, yet we're not educating them on what ORC is and and how retail is being impacted by it. We're not collaborating directly with them. So let's partner with a trusted, credible association of prosecutors to do with prosecutors what we did with law enforcement. And so Nelson Bunn, who's the executive director at NDAA, has been a fabulous partner to me personally and to RILA. We announced this national partnership, I think it was about a year ago in August. Since that time, Brand, we have held 2 retail crime workshops with prosecutors from around the country. We announced the National Store Walk campaign, where
I saw that.
We brought retailers and prosecutors together to walk retail stores so that they could learn from each other. I mean, think about, you love tech. Think about all the emerging tech that retailers have in their stores right now that they didn't have just a couple of years ago, that records evidence of crime, right? And so if we're going to prosecute these folks, we need to ensure that all of that evidence is turned over to the prosecutors. Well, when prosecutors don't know what technology retailers are leveraging, particularly that emerging tech, and how it can be useful in identifying suspects, right? They're not well positioned to do what they're hired to do when it comes to prosecuting cases. And so we said, let's bring them together. Let's walk stores. let's give the prosecutors exposure to what retailers are doing. And by the way, let's let the prosecutors tell the retailers what they need so that they can do their jobs better, right? We've hosted over 100 store walks between DAs and retailers across the country.
Wow.
Yep. It's been amazing.
Good Lord. Awesome.
Amazing. We hold regular cadences of virtual sessions between retailers and prosecutors where they can talk about persistent challenges, ways to overcome those challenges. And I would say that the most significant initiative to come out of the partnership, and dare I say, one of the most significant initiatives to hit the retail industry, is our Vibrant Communities initiative. And I'll be happy to talk more about that a little bit later, but I don't want to inundate you with details. But the partnership with NDAA is really about establishing those connections between the line prosecutors who are prosecuting the cases that the in-store AP practitioners are initiating. So enhancing that partnership, enhancing that collaboration so that we can ensure that the right approaches are taken to go after those prolific offenders.
That's an awesome point you brought up, awareness of the technology and the information and intelligence that some retailers may have. Because, you got the full spectrum. You got more advanced retailers that are getting serious about actually spending money on something other than padlocks and retired law enforcement. They're doing artificial intelligence. They're doing, some of the more innovative French AI company, Vision. Everseen has an in-store real-time behavioral analysis detection, Zero Eyes. There are a lot of resources out there. So take just a second, because I think that's significant. What was the reception? Was it like, holy crap, from the DAs that thought I had no idea? Or was it, that's cool? What was their response to this introduction to advanced technology?
Holy crap.
Good.
Look at what retail is up to. Didn't know this technology existed, but their mouths were watering at the level of evidence that these technologies are capable of collecting, because that's going to make their jobs easier. Now,
Sure.
It's funny. I should put air quotes around easier, because I have heard prosecutors say, oh my God, now there's so much video. And, now we've also got LPR, and we've got facial rec, and we've got body worn cameras. And, so there's so much influx of data, which can be evidence in a criminal case. To some extent, it might be overwhelming for prosecutors. But they were across the board supremely impressed with the sophistication of retail in terms of crime mitigation technology.
Yeah, the little elevator pitch I'll give on that. You've known me for years, and I will take my dying breath saying that we're not doing enough on the emerging tech and retail. There is a lot more we can do. Some are getting there. Some are stubbornly dug in on kind of waiting for this wave, because everybody's shrink has exploded. I don't think there's a retailer out there except Marvin Ellison from Lowe's said, look, we're really not seeing this problem. But most everybody else has gotten a gut punch from shrink in the last 2 to 3 years for all the reasons we've just talked about.
Yep.
Are there, in the areas where we see the biggest challenges with these district attorneys? So let's wave the magic wand, and Lisa has walked with every DA in the country. And we know from the media that there are pockets of more appeasing policies, some on the West Coast, some on the East Coast. What can retailers do differently in those harder to convince prosecutorial channels? Is there something different? So if you go to Bentonville, Arkansas, Walmart and the Bentonville PD and those guys, they're like brothers. I mean, there is no daylight between the two of them. But then you go to other areas of the country and it's like, hey, deal with it, retail. I'm busy doing traffic counts or something else. What can retail do to kind of get them to the table?
Yeah, good question. But first, let me just clarify something. Did you actually say that we know from the media?
God damn it, Lisa. Yes, I did.
Okay.
Too bad this is being recorded. I could take that back, but
yeah, no,
I get it. It's probably BS, but that's why you're here.
I'm not sure we know much from the media. Media reported last week that shoplifting is down in Seattle. So, Seattle's down 600 cops, and of course, shoplifting is down in Seattle because retailers don't report it.
Yeah.
So the first thing I'll say is, Brand, is sure, the major metropolitan areas like New York, Seattle, Chicago, San Francisco, they've seen obviously very significant challenges when it comes to rising retail crime. It also feels like they might be more resource constrained, although I don't know. Like, I think of Seattle PD, so they're down 600 cops, right? And that's a massive, massive number. But I would imagine that some of these other big city police departments are also resource constrained, but the number's not as big because they don't have as many cops to start with, right? Yeah. And so the problem in metro in big cities is significant. But I would also say that it's also significant in rural and suburbs across the country, right? And you know this, ORC, whether you're talking about, ORC, unaffiliated, prolific offenders, like they're not just going to, I live in Clinton, New Jersey. They're not just hitting Clinton, New Jersey stores, right? I mean, they're going from Clinton to the next town over, to the next county over, to the next state over, right? So, I don't know that we can say this is a big city problem. It's a national problem. Now, it's a lot easier for retailers perhaps to engage with Bentonville PD because, like you said, it's more brotherhood. It's a smaller jurisdiction, right? And I think that's really where the work needs to go in these major metropolitan areas for the retailers to connect directly with police and prosecutors. And that's what the partnership with CLEAR and NDAA aims to do. But I also think that information sharing is critical, particularly in these major city areas. So let me explain to you what I mean by that. So we're talking about technology, right? Vibrant communities, which is aimed at working with law enforcement, prosecutors, and social service organizations to mitigate recidivism among or across sort of these category of high impact offenders. That's sort of the overarching objective. It is rooted in information sharing. And that is accelerated by technology. So we've teamed up with 3 technology providers, Aura, LiveView Technologies, and Axon, particularly Axon Evidence, to leverage tech to facilitate information sharing among retailers and between retailers, law enforcement, and prosecutors. Because these high impact offenders, Brand, it used to be you'd have a guy, he'd only hit Walmart. You had a guy, he'd only hit Home Depot, right? Now they're segment agnostic. They don't care what the product is. They go in with their shopping list, and as long as they're targeting product that they can sell on Amazon, right? Or sell at the pawn shop or at the local bodega or the swap meet. It doesn't matter if it's Walmart, Target, Home Depot, Neiman's, right? So we as an industry have got to get better at knowing when we're getting hit by the same prolific offender. That's the first step in the process. Would you have ever thought that we could get 24 retailers to agree to use one platform to put all of their events into so that we could share or know when we're getting hit by the same bad guy. That's what we've accomplished in vibrant communities. We're piloting in Yolo and King County. So Yolo County is right outside of Sacramento. King County includes Seattle. Those are our pilot communities. A requirement for the retailers to participate was that they put all their theft events into the Aura platform. Not because we're endorsing Aura, but because we wanted to see the value that comes with that information sharing as it relates to aggregation of offenses. And then from that data, we are able to share with law enforcement and prosecutors who our highest impact offenders are. What does that do? That helps us streamline limited resources, both within retail and law enforcement. It helps us aggregate offenses across jurisdictions, right? And that helps with more aggressive prosecution. And so it's my long-winded way of saying, Brand, that in these major metropolitan areas where these prolific offenders are really hitting hard, we've got to get better at sharing information around high-impact offenders and high-risk environments, either by way of structured data information sharing and unstructured data information sharing. And by that, I mean through orcas and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So you're a lawyer. Ken Sensor, you remember Ken?
I do.
For those that may not remember Ken, he was a career, I never got it straight, FBI or CIA. Awesome guy. Was senior VP, I believe, upon his retirement at Walmart. He ran all of global security. And years ago, this very idea came up, and he hauled in a bunch of FBI guys and some data guys. Anyway, we had a meeting in Bentonville, and the overarching concern, it's encouraging to hear that you're saying this now has legs, because back in that day, it was, okay, if I'm Walmart and I'm going to pick a number, this has nothing to do with reality. Let's say they have 5 million cases a year in Walmart, and the next biggest retailer is 500,000. Proportionately, the penetration of data and the weighing of that data becomes heavily biased to Walmart data. And when our legal guys got involved, don't take offense to this, Lisa, but of course it slowed down when you get the lawyers in the room. But they brought up a really good point. Said, what happens when somebody in a store fat fingers or does something they shouldn't do? It's in the database. Walmart put it in. Target decides to take action on it, and they get sued because, in fact, it was incorrect. It began to show its fractures back then with that. Has that now been mitigated to a point where, yeah, there's risk, but it's not a big risk?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sure does. Good call out. So essentially what I'm hearing from you is AP practitioners will make impulse decisions based on the data they get from other retailers, right?
Or the police. The police can say, well, hell, it's in the database. Go arrest this person.
Right. So,
oh, shit.
Understand, though. So this is a very controlled pilot. Couple of things. Number one, the retailers don't have insight into each other's data. The platform, through AI, identifies patterns across the retailer's data and alerts the retailers when they might have a subject in common. That then prompts them to pick up the phone and say, what do you have? What do you have? What do you have? Right? And then they can collaborate on that investigation within the platform, but they don't have direct access to each other's data. The other important piece of this is no impulse decisions, right? These cases, Brand, are getting much more sophisticated. It's requiring a lot more investigative work and effort. So these are not AP practitioners who are saying, oh shit, well, sorry, I forgot I was on a podcast.
Yeah, I'm offended. I'm offended, Lisa. You're fine. We don't care.
So, well, Walmart AP practitioner says, okay, I've got this one case, and first of all, they're not going to have insight to Target's data, but let's just say they did, but they don't. It is no longer the case, Brand. These investigations are going on too long. Because remember, we're focused on the high impact offenders. We're not focused on the 2-bit shoplifter. We're not focused on the mom who can't afford to feed her kids, right? And who, is stealing food to feed the baby, right? And these high impact offender cases, these investigations go on for quite some time, right? And AP practitioners are dotting their I's, they're crossing their T's. We're not living in a retail world anymore where AP practitioners are like, oh, Walmart's got that same guy. Let me call the cops. Let me call Seattle PD and say, hey, Seattle PD, it's not just Target, it's Walmart too, right? That's not happening anymore. They are a very collaborative group. They're working together. They're working smart investigations, thorough investigations, and it's not as impulsive and reactive as it once was. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And it's encouraging because, the concept under Ken was an awesome idea. I mean, again, a career federal agent, so he knows what the hell he's talking about. And this makes logical sense. So that's...
Just to be clear, I want to clarify something. Working with Aura and Axon Evidence and LiveView, it's not about testing Aura. It's not about pushing for Aura or endorsing Aura or any of the technology providers. It's about testing the concept, right? So testing the concept of, and I use information sharing very loosely. I shouldn't really be using that term because it sets off alarm bells of information sharing. It's really more pattern identification, right? And then collaboration, right? We're testing that concept. And then the plan is through our partnership with NDAA, strike that. Through the Vibrant Communities Initiative, we're going to identify all these learnings, right? Pattern identification and collaboration works. That's what's going to be at the end of Vibrant. I know it, right? And then we're going to share those learnings in communities across the country through our partnership with the NDAA so that the approaches we're testing in King and YOLO can be replicated in other communities.
That, and again, from the media, and when I say media, I spend 90% of my time on LinkedIn. I'm not on Facebook and all that other crap. You know me, I'm just, stay in my lane. But it appears we're seeing a lot more large arrests, at least appear on social media, that takedowns from areas that all of us have questioned, LA, California, Washington State, Oregon, et cetera. It appears that maybe the wake-up call was received, and that, to have such policies as reportedly they have, that it's time to make a change. Three things that I think are paramount to this, and we've got about 12 minutes left, so I want to make sure I get this in. In my mind, as a career retailer, listening to the quarterly earnings calls, and just about all of them are saying something about shrink. And if they don't, CNBC does what they did to Doug McMillan and says, hey, what about the shrink problem? And of course, Doug's a retail operator. He started out unloading trucks in college, so he understands the mechanics from A to Z. He's like, you know what? Yeah, it's a problem. Yep, there's going to be price pressure, but it was more of a shot over the bow in perspective. And then you had some retailers saying, well, the reason we missed quarterly earnings is all theft. And then you got some retailers that didn't even mention it. So it's really A to Z. But in my mind, having done this and lived, for the listeners out there that may not know exactly where I sat, I was in the home office for 21 of those 22 years. in this exact conversational space that Lisa and I are talking about. But three things were always paramount, and it was always a Herculean task to get them aligned. One is the legislative wing, which Lisa has very effectively laid out for us, and we're going to talk about the Inform Act as one of our last questions. But the legislative component has to get some teeth in it, and that includes what we're going to talk about in the Inform Act is the e-com. So back in my day, it was eBay. They were the bad guys in the late 90s when they'd steal all the Gillette Mach 3s, and it all wound up on eBay. And, our chief merchant at the time is calling eBay. It's like, how the hell do you think they're winding up on your website? You don't buy them. So you can't tell me it ain't a problem. And it was that whole cat fight. Second component, in my mind, is capital investment. Many years, very frustrated with, number one, recognition of the problem. But in my mind, if this era we're in, if the shrink isn't bad enough now to be our Sputnik moment, is there going to be real investment in innovative technologies, not more lock and showcases, not retired law enforcement or extra hours or, one to show, one to go, all this crap that we've done since dirt? Is there going to be the introduction of those vendors you and I just talked about from around the world that are truly doing different things in AI that do more than just catching the crook? They can help with out of stocks. They can help with inventory management. They can help with safety measures in the store. Do you have a spill like what Ocucon does? Yeah. All of those sort of things. That's the second leg. And the third one is, beyond mentioning it on the earnings call, it's got to have in my mind, it's got to have C-suite muscle. It can't be, hey, I said it on the earnings call now. Hey, AP Vice President, go fix this shit. If it's going to be that, it's going to be hard. And you mentioned at the opening of the call, they're absolutely exhausted with all of the moving parts trying to get this to handle. So in my mind, and I can say this because I'm on nobody's W-2, it's got to be the CEO. It's got to be that player on the business roundtable at federal level. It's got to be the finance guys for once opening the checkbook to say, here's not 100,000 for padlocks, but 50 million to engage with our innovations team on artificial intelligence, behavior analysis, et cetera, et cetera. And then the legal component of the retailer, like you did so well at Home Depot, putting some real muscle behind pressure on the legislative components. And that is our long-winded segue into talk to us about the Inform Act. And is that really going to make a difference?
Yeah, so it will make a difference if retailers leverage it and AGs and the FTC enforce it. So, it's.
I know you well enough to know there's a message in that. So if you want, share it.
Right. So Inform, and I'm going to you know me too well, and it really bugs me. So Inform, and I'm oversimplifying here. It requires online marketplaces to collect, verify, and disclose information on high volume sellers, yep. Right? And it also includes a reporting mechanism that consumers and others can leverage when there's when they suspect suspicious activity or there's an issue with the product. And so retailers need to put some time into looking at what's being offered for sale on Amazon and other online marketplaces. They know the requirements of the Inform Act. Admittedly, it's challenging for the retailers to be able to spot examples of non-compliance, right? The non-compliance really sits with the online marketplace. They're going to know if there's non-compliance with Inform. It's a little bit harder for the retailers to be able to spot examples of non-compliance, but there are ways to leverage Inform for that purpose. And look, retailers, we are a member-driven association, and our members wanted us to fight for Inform, and that's what we did. And kudos to my colleagues, Michael Hansen and Jason Brewer, man. They are good at what they do. and they got this thing. They worked tirelessly to get this thing passed. So now it's passed, and now it's new, it's early, right? And retailers are still understanding it, understanding their role vis-a-vis Inform, coming up with investigatory protocol for leveraging Inform. We've got some front runners who really get it and who have said that they've leveraged Inform to their benefit to crack a few cases, big cases. And then look, any law, Brand, is only as good as the teeth behind it, right? The enforcement behind it.
So it's like raising a baby. I mean, it's a great idea. It's on the ground. It's the right thing to do. Conceptually, we just got to get muscle and priority behind it. Is that fair?
Did you just compare Inform to a baby?
Well, it's in its infancy. It's got problems, being colic, dirty diapers, whatever. But it's conceptually the right thing to do. It just needs a little bit more protein and executive direction on all levels. Would that be accurate?
Can I just say I got a 19-year-old and she's still a problem? So
oh my God, there you go. Well, that's mom. That ain't the kid.
I expect that we're gonna work through the kinks of Inform pretty much more quickly. And I do think it will have an impact, but then we also need the AGs and the FTC, who have enforcement authority under Inform, to look into how the online marketplaces are complying with its requirements. The AG can't come to the retailer and say, okay, give me information on how Amazon is complying with Inform. The AG's got to go to Amazon and say, give me the evidence that shows that you're complying with Inform, right? So it remains to be seen. I'm optimistic that it will have an impact if the various stakeholders do what we need them to do, including the online marketplaces.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of in a very different sense, Sarbanes-Oxley, all the compliance crap and the pains that we went through in the early days of that act and trying to get it there. But in my mind, as a career retailer, it's encouraging. I mean, like I said, my debut fresh off active duty was eBay. And at the time, they were about as interested in dealing with reselling stolen goods as I am in weathering patterns in the South Pole. Couldn't give a crap less. And it was obvious. It was always the Heisman as soon as you started the meeting. But I think as an industry, and I'm going to save 2 more minutes for the last questions, but as an industry, I am very encouraged because it was a very different focused industry when I joined in 1995. And we have better leaders. We have more well-rounded leaders. We have operationally grounded leaders like Gary Smith, who I'm talking to later today, a Paul Jekyll, who understand the complete balance of a retail operation to include upstream supply chain and all those anomalies that filter down and show up as shrink in the store. So I feel good about where the industry is, but you know me, I'm restless. I'll never say we've arrived on the innovative technology front because it just evolves too quickly. It's, in the hour we've been on this phone, there's probably 2 or 3 innovative tech providers somewhere overseas that is working on something to address exactly what we're talking about. Last question, because we have 2 minutes. We have to end a little bit early because Matt's got a bump for the next call. And I'm going to read, if it looks like I'm reading, because I am, off the question board. In your experience, this is for you, Lisa, in your experience, is there a retail sector, be it apparel, grocery, big box, Home Depot, chain drug, et cetera, that is leading the change or possibly more innovative with emerging technologies to support shrink effort? So is there a silo of the industry that's better than others? Grocery, big box, or are they all kind of at the table?
I don't think so, Brand. And look, my perspective is limited. I certainly don't follow every retailer in the emerging tech that they're adopting or working on, right? There's a lot going on behind the scenes that I just don't know. I don't think there's one segment There might be individual retailers who are more front runners than others, more, sort of willing to just think a bit more creatively. So just like, for example, let's take body-worn cameras. There's some stunning, compelling research coming out of the UK around the results that come from use of body-worn cameras as it relates to the reduction in violent incidences. ASDA, very publicly, right, formerly owned by Walmart, right? They went down the body-worn camera approach, and their results have been just out of this world. There are now some retailers initially the US based retail reaction was, no way are we going to use body-worn cameras, right? Because I invited ASDA to be part of a US based AP conversation to tell us about it. And the initial reaction from US based retailers was, no way, that doesn't fly in the US, right? Well, fast forward 2 years, and there are several retailers now who are piloting with body-worn cameras, even so much that they're saying,
that's right,
I feel irresponsible if I don't pilot body-worn cameras, right? Given the results coming from ASDA as it relates to safety incidences. And so
it's a new day.
It's a new day. And I don't worry about when is retail going to arrive, because if we say we've arrived, then we've stopped.
That's right.
Thinking, we've stopped experimenting, we've stopped exploring, right? So, it's kind of my long-winded way of saying, I feel pretty confident about the openness of US-based retailers to emerging tech. I think the challenge is getting those technology companies in front of the retailers, and what is the most efficient way to do that, right? Like, we've tried these Shark Tanks and these startup showcases, right? But it's like whack-a-mole, Brand. Like, what is a sustainable approach where RILA can put startups, emerging tech in front of our members on a regular basis so that they can get exposure to this stuff? I don't think it's the willingness to experiment. I think it's the access.
Well, yeah, and we're going to end there. But two things I'll say. If you ask ASDA, they bought us. We didn't buy them, and we've always had that banter back and forth over too many gin and tonics. But the last thing, if I'm a provider, it is the struggle for capital. The outside looking in, and in my 20 years in the saddle, it's like it is the most difficult component is proving the ROI, being able to let loose of some money, and depending on who your leadership is, to whether they have an appetite for, look, this may or may not work. And I had some great VPs at the time over the years that said, sure, just don't lose this money too many times, because then I've got to answer. So that component, and I know you're well versed in that, the providers are like, you know what, it'd be great if somebody'd sign a damn contract and let's do something. So we're going to end it there, Lisa. I greatly appreciate for the platform. Lisa is a great friend of mine. We've been friends for years, and we have these kind of spirited conversations. Lisa, thank you so much for everything, number one, that you do for the industry. You are a very unique, outspoken, no bullshit, qualified champion for the retail industry. And we desperately need that, and we always will. So thank you from the industry. And I greatly appreciate your spending an hour with us. Guys, if you want our contact info, I've seen a couple messages come through. We're both on LinkedIn. Our information's on LinkedIn. Reach out and grab it. But thank you very much to everybody. And thank you, Lisa, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Brand.
See you guys. Thank you.
Guys.